Good morning, everybody. Bore da pawb. My name is Hayden Llewellyn. I'm the Chief Executive of the EWC, the Education Workforce Council, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's event. So this is one of EWC's regular policy briefings, and what we're going to cover with you today is specifically learning support staff in schools. Learning support staff in schools is the biggest group on the EWC Register of Education Practitioners. And I'm sure you know there are more support staff working in our schools in Wales than teachers, actually. So I think it's a really good area to discuss today. We're going to take the session in 3 blocks. So to begin with, 3 members of EWC staff, 2 of our directors, David Brown and Bethan Stacey, joined by Nia Griffith, our data manager, going to talk about the data on the register. A lot of what we're going to show you today is new. It's not been in the public domain before, and share some trends and thoughts with you. So that'll take about 30 minutes. But then I'm delighted to say we have 4 external speakers to share thoughts with you today. And we're really grateful for them taking the time to be with us and chance for them to share their thoughts with you. So we've got Jerry McNamara, who's the head teacher at Bryn Mawr Foundation School. Jerry's joined by one of his staff, Bernadette Fletcher. And we also have Rosie Lewis from Unison. Many of you will know Rosie. And joining Rosie is Sarah Jenkins from Bryn Mawr Foundation School. Sorry, I mixed the 2 up there. Bernadette is from T Gwyn and Sarah's from Bryn Mawr. My apologies, sorry to you both. But really lucky to have those 4 with us today, and they're going to share some thoughts with you in terms of their experience and practice as regards learning support staff work. So once we've done those 2 inputs, we're going to go to Q&As. Generally, the EWC questions generate quite a lot of questions. So you can ask those in 2 ways. Either pop those questions in the chat as we run through. We've got some EWC staff who are going to collate those questions and pass them through to me to facilitate. Alternatively, when we get to the end of the Q&A session, you can pop your flag up there and indicate to our staff that you want to ask a question, and we can do it in that way. You can actually speak to your question if you so wish. So please encourage you to bring your questions forward. As I say, we're really lucky today to have a bunch of people who've got expertise in this area. So I think the opportunity to have a really good session is good. Finally, some housekeeping things from me before we make a start. So your cameras and mics are automatically turned off, but once we get to that Q&A session, you'll be able to turn those on if you wish to speak. If you do lose connection, please just click the link that you came into the session on. You should be able to get straight back in. The event today, as with all EWC events of this nature, we usually try and record these. The one today is being recorded. We often get feedback that people want to share the event after because they thought it was good. So it'll be on the EWC website in a couple of weeks' time for that to be shared. And finally, from me, translation. Some of our speakers today are going to speak through the medium of Welsh. So we've got a translator, Nerys, on hand. So as usual, please click on the globe button and you can choose there if you need the English translation. So that tends to work absolutely fine. So there shouldn't be any problems. So that's the overview for today's event. As I say, big welcome to everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us. So we're going to make a start and we'll begin with the EWC input, which is sharing the data with you, but also some policy perspectives from other professions and countries. So David, over to you to begin. I know you're going to pass it on to Nia and on to Bethan. So David, away you go.
Diolch, Hayden. The EWC, next slide, please. The EWC is unique in terms of regulating across several different categories of registration. And in March, we were registering across 11 different categories. For ease of reference, independent school staff have been included in the bottom 2 categories, and independent post-16 special staff have been included with the further education categories. With that further explanation, this pyramid shows you that over 48,000 registrants were eligible to work in the learning support worker category, which represents 46.4% of those registered with the EWC. Slide nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. This is a new analysis that we presented in our education workforce statistics report this year. This is a two-way matrix with each registration category shown across the top in the columns, as well as down the left-hand side in the rows. The white numbers in the green box is shown diagonally across the centre of the table, from top left to bottom right, are those individuals who are only registered in that category. If we look at school learning support workers, which is the second from the top on the left-hand side, if I take you along to the green cell, we can see that 39,204 registrants are only registered as school learning support workers. The numbers either side in the white cells show the number of school learner support workers who are also registered in other registration categories. The majority of these are also registered as teachers, but 2,778 are also registered as FE learner support workers. We are seeing that the support worker categories are more likely to be registered in multiple categories. Slide nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. This slide gives you an overview of how the school learner support worker registration category looks like in 2024 and provides a snapshot of gender, age, ethnic group, national identity, and disability. Gender, top left, we can see the gender breakdown and a very female-dominated workforce at 85.4%. This has consistently been the highest percentage of all the registration categories for years. Underneath that, we can see the age breakdown and a majority young workforce, with 31.4% being 29 years of age or younger. This is by far the youngest age profile of any registration category. The next highest is FE learning support worker at 19.7%. Moving to the right-hand side of the slide, we can see the ethnic group breakdown. And after white, the highest percentage of registrants are reporting as Asian or Asian British at 3.5%. Comparing to other registration categories, we are seeing more registrants declaring their ethnic group, and this could be linked to the young age profile of this registration group. Only the FE learning support worker category has a higher percentage of Black, Asian, and minority ethnic registrants at 8.3% in comparison to 7.5% of school learning support workers. However, these are both higher than the 6.3% which was reported in the 2021 census data for Wales. Despite seeing a slight increase in our percentages over the past 5 years, we continue to believe that ethnic groups have been underrepresented within the workforce. As you would expect, the highest percentage of our registrants identify as Welsh at 45.9%, followed by British at 27.8%. This profile is very similar across all our other registrant groups as well. These percentages have been stable for many years. Nationality is another field where we have some high percentages of unknowns, and these tend to be historic records of individuals who've remained registered with us for many years. We're continually looking to reduce the number of unknowns on the register to improve the quality and completeness of our data. In terms of definition of disability, this is a legal one and not a medical one under the Equality Act 2010. This is also a field where, unless a registrant actively selects yes, it will be counted as a no. School learning support workers has the second lowest percentage of registrants reporting a disability across all registration groups at 2.8%. Teachers are first with 1.2% recording a disability. Slide nesaf os gwelwch yn dda. Continuing with the overview of 2024, at the top of the page, we can see the Welsh language ability of school learning support workers. On the left, we have the Welsh speaking ability, and you can see that 20% are recording that they are fluent or fairly fluent in their ability to speak Welsh. Then, on the top right, we have the registrant's ability to work through the medium of Welsh. This is again a self-declaration where the registrant records if they are trained to, are able to, or have ever worked through the medium of Welsh. There has always been a drop between the numbers of people Welsh speaking and people Welsh working, and here we have 17.2% of registrants able to work through the medium of Welsh. Comparing this with teachers, we have always seen that the percentages of Welsh speaking and Welsh working for school learning support workers has been lower. Moving to the bottom of the page, we have the phase breakdown, which we have arranged in descending numerical order. Here you can see that the majority of registrants within the primary sector. However, suppliers are very close second with 29.5% and 23.8% respectively. Please note that those registering as work in supply could be in either primary or secondary phase. However, both of these combined equates to over half of school learning support worker registrants. Comparing the figure with the teachers, where 11.3% of those registered are working as supply teachers. And now Nia, our data manager, will present our more detailed analysis. Sleid nesaf os gwelwch yn dda.
So now we're going to move to look at some trends in the data. On these two line charts, the dark green line at the top of the chart shows the number of individuals registered who are eligible to work. The light green line shows the number of individuals who are registered in posts within the category. Looking at the learning support workers in the chart, we can see that the first year they were registered in 2017, and that was the lowest number of those who are eligible to work and within post. This is followed by a gradual increase that saw a boost in the number of registrants during COVID, causing a peak in 2023. Compared with school teachers at the bottom of the page, we can see that the number of eligible teachers saw a high point in 2022 with the first registrations, between a drop that was followed by a period of stability between 2008 and 2010 before another gradual drop in numbers, which is contrary to the numbers of the learning support workers in schools. Another difference we can see is that the gap between those who are eligible to practice and those in active employment has remained relatively stable for teachers, whilst the gap with learning support workers in schools has grown. Next slide, please. Qualifications are a new area of analysis for us in terms of school learning support workers, and we have been looking at the number of registrants who have a specific qualification. The chart above shows a 5-year trend for those who have a high level teaching qualification, which equates to the level 4 on the framework. As you can see, the number of individuals who have this qualification has increased gradually the past 5 years before getting to a stable level in 2024 with 1,757 individuals. Then the bottom chart shows the number of registrants who have a PGCE qualification. The number got to its peak in 2023 before dropping slightly to 4,333 individuals in 2024. But what we find interesting is that 2,725 or 62.9% of these are only registered as learning support workers in schools. Next slide, please. So this took us into look in more depth at qualifications. On the left-hand side, we can see an analysis of the number of school learning support workers according to the highest level qualification recorded. If I give you a few examples of the qualifications to the levels, level 8 equates to a PhD, level 7 equates to a master's course, level 6 equates to a degree, level 5 to a foundation degree, level 4 to a higher level teaching qualification, and level 3 equates to an A-level or foundation diploma. Other includes those who don't have any relevant qualification, those for whom a level of qualification cannot be determined, or those who don't have any registered or recorded qualification. We're seeing a high number falling into this category, but it's possible because there is no compulsory qualification for registration, which is different for other categories. But despite this, we can see a considerable amount, 28.8% of registrants who have a degree or above level qualification. If I move you then over to the right-hand side of the page, what we can see here is an analysis of the particular area of expertise we have within the category. These have been put in the order, and they state the levels within qualification levels 6, 7 and 8. I'll take notice of some of the important ones for us, such as education studies, which shows that there are 1,771 individuals, childcare and child development with 322 individuals, but also those who have degrees in law, 184, and mathematics, 175 individuals. Next slide, please. So, having seen some of the numbers and qualifications as I've shown, my team and I fell down a rabbit hole and wanted to find out more. So we've looked specifically at the priority subjects, and in the table across the top, we can see that these have been divided into three categories. Going from the left to right, those who are only registered as school learning support workers under singular registration, those who are registered as learning support workers but are also in other registration categories, which is a multiple registration, then the combined total of these. Moving back then from right to left, we can see that we have a total of 1,081 individuals who have a higher level qualification or a degree in priority subjects. Moving then to the middle of the table, we can see that we have just under a half, 48%, who have multiple registrations, and they could be working in another registration category. But if we move to the left again, and these are the ones I want to focus on, we can see that over a half, 52%, are only registered as school learning support workers. 71 of these have a degree or higher level qualification in mathematics. 181 of these have one of the sciences, which is 16.7% of the total of individuals registered in priority subjects. Moving then to the bottom of the page, we can see in what phase these individuals are working. And as you can see, 38.3% and 215 individuals are working as learning support working supply workers at the moment. Next slide, please. Then to look at the number of school learning support workers undertaking supply work. As I said earlier, these are particularly young, with almost half of them, 47.7% of those who are in supply, being aged under 29 years of age. This profile is typically younger than general learning support workers, who have 31.4% who are under the age of 29. Those undertaking supply work, we can see that 16.8% of them who have recorded that they are fluent or relatively fluent in Welsh, and this is lower than the general percentage for learning support workers in schools, which is 20%. This is also reflected in what we know about the difficulties that certain schools have encountered in finding school learning support workers who can supply, who are Welsh speakers. To summarise the last few slides then that have looked at qualifications, what we can see here is the number of individuals who are very highly educated, but not only, they are the majority young category who can be a resource to support and supplement the number of teachers in the education workforce. Next slide, please. To conclude in terms of data then, we're going to look a little bit at retention. The table at the top of the slide shows the difference from year to year between registrants who come in and those who have deregistered over the past 5 years. In the first line of the table, we can see the total number of registered individuals registered to work as school learning support workers. The next line shows the number of individuals who are registered who have become deregistered. Then we can see the number of new registrants who join, and then finally the difference year on year. The bar chart at the middle of the page shows the percentage change from year to year, and as you can see, the category saw a new inflow of individuals in 2022 and 23 before a drop in 2024. In the table at the bottom of the page, we can see the analysis of retention that follows a specific registrant group from 2019. We undertook an analysis to see how many remained registered after 5 years, and you can see in the top line there, 53.2% were retained. Then those who are no longer registered were 39.3%, and then those from the category who'd changed category, that was 7.6% registered but a changed category. If we were to compare this to other registration categories, teachers had a retention rate of 76% after 5 years who were continued to be registered. However, Further education learning support workers had a lower retention rate of 50.7%, continuing to be registered after 5 years. Next slide, please. To look in more detail then into our retention data, here you can see our analysis of retention of learning support workers and teachers who speak Welsh compared to non-Welsh speaking learning support workers and school teachers. So we look at the same analysis we did in the previous slide, to look at the 2019 cohort to see if their registrations had changed after 5 years. The table on the top left shows the number and percentages of school learning support workers who are Welsh speakers. Here we can see that 54% of those remained on the register after 5 years, while 33.2% had deregistered and 12.8% had changed their registrant category. Then on the right-hand side, we can see the figures for the school learning support workers who are non-Welsh speakers. Here, 53% had retained registered, and 40.8% had deregistered, and 6.3% had registered in another category. The reason for the high numbers of learning support workers in schools registering in another category is because of data cleaning projects that we undertook last year, where we contacted around 3,000 registrants who had been registered as teachers and learning support workers to ask if they needed to be registered in both categories. Because of this, we saw a number of learning support workers revising their category of registration. Then at the bottom of the page, we can see the comparison with school teachers across the same period. 79% of them remained registered with us, 19.9% of them had deregistered, and only 1% had changed registration category of Welsh speakers. Moving to the right-hand side, we can see the same cohort from 2019, but following non-Welsh speaking school teachers, and we can see there that 74.5% had continued to be registered, 23.7% had deregistered entirely, and 1.9% had moved category of registration. So to summarise, the difference is not as apparent as it is for school teachers, but comparing the two groups, we can also see a higher percentage of learning support workers who speak Welsh continuing to be registered than those who are not Welsh speaking over the same period of time. And that concludes the data part of the presentation. I'll hand over now to Beth. Thank you, Beth. Thank you very much to David and Nia for a very comprehensive presentation of the data. I'm going to build on the picture of the workforce that was being presented through the data and give you a little bit of context in order to bring the data to life. The information I would like to present is based on desk-based research, but also on the regular contact and discussions we have in our everyday work directly with the learning support workforce, teachers and head teachers, also with local authorities, with recruitment agencies, unions, Welsh Government and others. So we've already heard that the school learning support workforce is our largest registrant group, larger than that of registered school teachers, and therefore it's clear that this workforce plays a significant role in supporting the education of our learners in Wales. Our learning support workers work in a wide range of roles across primary, secondary and additional learning needs schools. Although the roles in the different phases are similar, there tends to be a stronger emphasis on pastoral, social and emotional support for those working with younger children and those in additional learning needs schools. Frequently, our support workers carry a lot of responsibility and their work can be challenging and sometimes requires specialist skills and knowledge, not least because for many, a key element of the job is to support learners with additional learning needs, whether they be pupils and learners in mainstream or special schools. The support they provide is often tailored to the needs of individual learners, and this support can include assisting children with significant physical needs, administering medication, managing behaviour, supporting communication, and in special schools, They're required to work closely with other professionals, such as speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, and physiotherapists, as well as teachers. In the mainstream, the role of learning support workers often focuses on ensuring that children with additional learning needs are integrated alongside other learners in line with the aims of the Additional Learning Needs Act of 2018 and the requirements of the Additional Learning Needs Code for Wales 2021. Of course, we support this framework, but it is important to recognise the significant demands this can place on our schools, including the impact on learning support workers' workload and the need for these practitioners to develop more specialist skills. Now that I've touched a little bit on the role in Wales, what does the learning support workforce look like in other parts of the United Kingdom and further afield? Well, broadly speaking, although the job title may be different, the learning support worker role exists in a range of other countries, including England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and many EU countries. Although the exact nature of these roles may vary, reflecting the very different nature of some of the education systems, the responsibilities they carry out are relatively similar to those in Wales. But what is notable is that the size of the workforce in Wales seems to be far larger compared to the other countries, and also there is more extensive use of the learning support workforce in Wales compared to the other countries. On to the next slide, please. We've heard from Nia through the data about some of the challenges associated with retaining learning support staff in Wales. So let's discuss some of the areas that may be contributing to this, starting with pay and terms and conditions. What is noteworthy is that even though we know that discussions and work has been taking place thus far, there is no consistent national framework for setting learning support workers' salaries, and the arrangements therefore vary across the local authority areas. And as with many other public sector roles, pay rises have failed to keep up with inflation, exacerbating the impact of the cost of living crisis for many learning support workers. To add to this, pay has also failed to keep up with other professions, particularly those in the private sector. It's also important to note that learning support workers are employed on a variety of different types of contracts. A large number of learning support workers are employed on term time only contracts. As a result, many learning support workers are taking on extra jobs to boost their income, including during school holidays and on weekends. Some are leaving their roles altogether, attracted by job opportunities in other sectors that may be less challenging and also that offer better pay and conditions. For those who stay in the workforce then, what are their career progression options? Well, there are a number of ways they could develop their careers in schools, particularly if they have specialist skills and knowledge or have demonstrated an ability to take on additional responsibilities. HLTA status provides greater responsibility and often increased pay, including working closely with teachers on lesson planning, preparing classrooms, supporting students and monitoring progress. HLTAs are often able to lead lessons and teach classes when teachers are absent. In order to become an HLTA, firstly, individuals need to have experience of working as a teaching assistant and of demonstrating evidence of specialist skills, effective practice against the professional standards for assisting teaching, experience of leading learning for whole classes without the presence of a qualified teacher, and to possess or be willing to possess a minimum level 2 qualification. Some learning support workers, if they have the necessary qualifications, choose to undertake teacher training through pathways such as the PGCE, which then enables them to transition from a support role to working as a school teacher. On to the next slide, please. As Nia has outlined, those who have registered with us as school learning support workers are a very diverse group in terms of the level of qualifications they possess. Crucially, at the moment, there are no requisite minimum qualifications to be employed as a learning support worker in a school in Wales. This is in contrast to some of the other groups of EWC registered practitioners, particularly school teachers. Unison and others have previously argued that introducing minimum qualifications for learning support workers could help to improve the quality of support provided to learners, promote standards in schools, promote career development, and improve status for learning support workers. Still, this would be a major shift for the workforce with wide-ranging implications, and careful consideration would need to be given before introducing such a measure. To conclude, I'd like to discuss the professional learning offer for our learning support workers, which is absolutely vital in terms of workforce development, promoting competence and improving professional status and workforce remuneration. Although the National Professional Learning Entitlement was introduced by the Welsh Government in September 2022, stating that all learning support workers are entitled to an individual professional learning journey with the support of their school or their setting leaders, professional learning for support workers continues to be criticised as being inconsistent. For example, in a 2023 Unison Cymru survey of 409 teaching assistants from all parts of Wales, 66% stated that they'd not received adequate training to deliver the curriculum for Wales. To add to this, use of and engagement with the professional standards for assisting teaching introduced in 2019 is also varied as set out in the 2023 report by Welsh Government, an evaluation of the professional standards for teaching, leadership and assisting teaching. There are links between the professional learning offer and all the other policy areas discussed this morning, including recruitment and retention of the learning support workforce. And this area must be considered carefully to ensure that any professional learning offer developed for them reflects this particular group and should be proportionate, affordable, and fit for purpose. I'm going to hand over to Hayden now so that he can introduce our guest speakers so that you can hear more on the detail and input from those working at the classroom level. Thank you.
Nôl I chi, Hayden.
Thanks very much, Beth, and thank you to David, Nia and Beth in terms of the data insights that they've shared with you. We always find that people are interested in that stuff and often come back to us at a later stage to say, can you break the data down a little bit further in a particular way? So always pleased to hear from people in that regard. So that's the first block of the session today. We're a little bit ahead, only a tiddly bit. So in terms of the next block, as I said in the introduction, we've got 4 guests who are going to give you some insights and shares from their own experience. So we're a little bit ahead, so you can take a little bit longer if you need to. So the order we're going to go is we're going to start with Rosie, then on to Jerry, and then we'll go forward from there. So Rosie, over to you, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody, and thank you for those interesting statistics and the introduction there. My name's Rosie Lewis. I am a regional organiser with Unison, and I'm the lead for schools in Wales. So everything that we're talking about today is really dear to my heart. We represent the largest group of learning support workers in the workforce in Wales. And I wanted to focus particularly on some of the issues that our members face around pay, which I think actually reflects a lot of the statistics and the information that we've been provided so far this morning. And one of the words that's come up a number of times already this morning is inconsistency. And I think one of the things that most of our members would argue is problematic in light of the work that they do is the inconsistency in the roles. That doesn't necessarily only mean the inconsistency in the way that they are deployed in work. Many of them will have a role profile and a job description that actually does not seem very familiar to them when they're actually in the classroom. But also one of the most important things, and I think this is a very good indicator when we consider the number of learning support workers who have remained in post, particularly after 5 years, is issues around pay. We know already from the stats that this is a predominantly female workforce, and as a result, there's females who are very low paid, and this is certainly something that is problematic for a lot of our members. They're low paid women who are often having to take on more than one job just to make ends meet. Added to that is the problem that they are employed for term time only. So we see a lot of our members having to take on additional jobs, either to make ends meet during the long school holidays, for example, but also during the day, just to be able to put food on the table for their children. And many are actually having to use food banks, which I think reflects the fact that these are considered a group of professional staff working in schools, helping children to attain the levels that we want to in Wales, helping to get to that those high stakes that we want for our pupils and children and young people in Wales, but really struggling to make ends meet. And I think that's very reflective of what we see from our members. A level 1 TA, for example, will earn as little as £12.70 an hour, rising to about £12.95 an hour, which, if you think coupled with the fact that every school holiday those members are not paid to be in work, actually indicates why they do need to do extra jobs such as breakfast clubs, after school clubs, and working in the hospitality industry and retail industry over the long periods of the summer. So, inconsistency is certainly one of the things that we would argue causes an issue for a lot of our members. They often work outside of their grade. They might be employed at a certain level, at one of the lowest levels, but find that they're actually being deployed often to work as teachers on the cheap. Unison has done a number of studies. There's a very recent one that's been published this year by Dr. Robert Webster. It's called Teaching on the Cheap. And it indicated from that how many of the learning support workers who were responding to the survey indicated that they often had to cover a class, and 76% of them were not even reimbursed for the uplift. So one of the things that I think we could do, and this is where the information from the EWC is really helpful, is to help and provide some consistency across Wales in terms of teaching assistants' pay and terms and conditions. If you're a teaching assistant in Cardiff, for example, in a school in Cardiff, you could have completely different pay for doing the same and similar role in another school in Cardiff, and then go outside of the borough to Newport or another neighbouring authority, and it would look completely different again. Yet for teachers and others working in the profession, there is a set standard that they would expect across Wales. So what we really feel very strongly about, and this has come about from a review and looking at pay and deployment and opportunities for professional development as part of the School Social Partnership Forum, is actually look at what we can do to make some consistency across the board for this group of professionals, pay being one of the real key issues that would benefit our members and benefit learning support workers in school, and might well aid some of the retention issues that we tend to see, certainly from these statistics. I don't know whether I'm going over my time now, Hayden, but I think it's really important to start considering the levels of pay of this group, of the very important part of the workforce. They're already, as we've heard, over 50, nearly 50% of the registrants are learning support workers. If this group of staff are to provide, proper opportunities for professional development to be recognised as professionals by being registered with the Education Workforce Councils, then we need to see changes to the way they're employed. We need to see improvements in pay. The recommendations of the School Support Staff Task and Finish Group was to scrap the level 1 role because they're not fit for purpose. We need to see that implemented, and a review of term time only working for these members of staff who often work outside of their, not only outside of their grade, but outside of their hours, covering for things like school trips, coming in more early in the morning, helping children off transport and buses, doing the school disco, school Christmas concerts, all the things that are quite topical at the moment, for no extra pay. So one of the things that I think we need to consider moving forward is how can we recognise the value of the staff who work in these roles when we're not actually addressing the low pay and the term time only conditions with which and contracts with which they work.
Thank you, Rosie. Excellent as always. Really appreciate that. So we're going to hand on to Jerry. As I say this, Jerry McNamara, head teacher of Bryn Mawr Foundation School. Jerry, welcome.
Hi, Aidan. Thanks very much. First of all, thanks very much for inviting me, and it was really informative to hear the presentations earlier on. I'm going to speak firstly for head teacher, and then I'll speak then as chair of the Welsh School Partnership Forum, one of the subcommittees there, which is the Workforce Board, which we focused upon the work of the TAs. But first of all, I have to say the TAs, they play a crucial part in the helping schools achieve the Wales's national mission. And that's to make sure that we can provide high standards of learning across our classrooms. We can raise the aspirations of our pupils as well. And in doing this, we need a well-trained staff. I think looking towards the future, we need, the Welsh economy needs a very effective, multifunctional, literate and numerate workforce that we in schools need to provide. And in doing that, that provision we provide has to be delivered by the most highly trained staff that we can do within, we can provide within Wales. And I think as a head teacher, I think I wouldn't be able to operate the school without the role of the TAs presently here. I think they provide an enormous function. But let's kind of think back of where the TA role has actually come from. And it started off as parents or carers volunteering to listen to pupils read or to assist the learning of the teacher within their classroom. And that probably started off maybe, up to about 20 years ago. And then we started making it more formalized, where positions became available within schools for TAs. And that's developed over time, and TAs have become very well versed in using data to understand the progress of children, particularly in literacy, and helping them to make progress. But I think we've had sudden changes recently, and I think there's definitely a changing educational landscape. We first of all went through COVID, where TAs had to work very differently, like everyone else. But again, they developed their skills during this period of time in the work that they were assigned to do. But I think the introduction of the ALN bill and also the Curriculum for Wales has really sharpened the lens of how we monitor and help children to make progress, particularly in pupil skills and literacy and numeracy, but also helping pupils as well, whichever needs they have, to make sure that we know our pupils, we understand our pupils, and we can help them to make progress within our classrooms. And this was vital that we listen very carefully to TAs in we're trying to help them. And in one of the roles I do, that's chairing the Workforce Board that feeds into the School's Social Partnership Forum. We looked at this in close detail, and two of the aspects I'll focus upon now is deployment and professional learning. When it came to deployment, we got great variation or inconsistency of how TAs were deployed across, not just within local authorities, but across Wales in general. And though it didn't always seem that TAs who were appointed to a particular level were deployed in those areas. And this created some kind of frustration for the TAs. And also the lack of access to professional learning. And this has been touched upon by Bethan earlier. And Bethan did a very good detail of the type of roles that they do within our schools. So first of all, how do we address the issue on deployment? We thought it was best to standardise the roles, so therefore we looked at the job descriptions. Now, the national job descriptions haven't been updated since 2008, so we went back to the old descriptions. We created a subgroup of 15 TAs from across Wales, from all school settings, from primaries, secondaries, Welsh, faith, through schools. And we work with them carefully, evaluating where the current responsibilities, incorporating ALN and Curriculum for Wales, the type of jobs that the modern effective TA would be deployed to do. And we created these 4 job descriptions from level 1 to level 4. And then we met with all the local authorities, and these templates have been circulated to the 22 local authorities across Wales. They've been accepted by the local authorities, and within these local authorities, they are templates, and we understand that schools will add to these certain duties within these job descriptions. But what the important aspect is that the duties that are added are within the same level of responsibility and accountability. So therefore, people are working within their level that they've been appointed on. Now, we understand things can change within schools, that sometimes we have absences. And what we've said is, if there is absences, yes, by all means, TAs, they like the opportunity of the increased professional learning, of carrying out a role at a different level. But they must be remunerated for this change in work. So we've no problem with that, and the TAs have no problem as well. But it's ensuring that that work is recognised that they're actually doing. The other aspect is professional learning. I think what we had to look at first was what the provision was, particularly across the different consortia, and to try and make that more consistent in how they were delivering it. Also, when we had feedback from TAs, we found that sometimes they weren't invited into schools for the inset days. And our last educational minister, he publicly said that his expectation was that all TAs were invited and participated in inset days, and they weren't carrying out tasks around classrooms. They were actually participating in bespoke training that would help them with greater strategies that they could help their pupils make progress. And I think there has been some movement in that. More recently, I think there has been improvements in the levels of professional learning as generally across Wales. Of course, part of our remit as well is education for all school leaders, making sure they have an understanding of these new job descriptions, of these templates, but also the importance of professional learning, the offer that is out there, and what can be best, or what strategies can be best shared with TAs that they can help make progress within their schools. So that's a piece of work as well, is making sure we share that best practice that's happening already. And within Hub, there's already some videos there of sharing best practice within schools from TAs as well. And finally, we also had to work with governors to make sure governors are questioning their leaders, to ensure that TAs are being valued as a member of staff in that workforce, and also that they're having an appropriate professional learning, and also they're being rewarded as well for the job that they're completing within their schools. Okay, Hayden, thanks very much.
Jerry, thank you as always, really insightful again, thank you. Okay, as I said earlier, we're really lucky today to have 2 practitioners. Firstly, I'm going to invite Bernie Fletcher from T Gwyn to speak. As you'll know, when it comes to learning support staff, their role and relevance in ALN settings is absolutely vital. When I go into special schools, I'll see at least 80% of the staff are support staff. So it's really great to have Bernie with us today. So Bernie, over to you to share some insights, please.
Technical trouble for the moment. Okay, can you hear me? Yes. Can I start by saying that I work at T Gwyn Special School in Cardiff, and that our job, I think, is a little different to many of the other roles, but I can only talk about life here in Tŷ Gwyn. You said that you wanted to know about our day-to-day work, and I'd like to take my 3 minutes to try and describe that to you best I can. To begin with, our pupils. We should have just 8 pupils per class. I know that sounds unbelievable to people outside the special sector, but in fact, we usually end up having between 11 and 12 of our hugely complex, physical and medically challenged children. And the other half of our school here has a whole side of the school of children who have behaviours that challenge. Many of our children are at very early stages of development. They're still learning to look, they're still learning to listen, they're still becoming aware of where their body ends and the rest of the world begins. In our class, we're usually 1 teacher to 3 or 4 TAs. But the most important help we can give our children is time to learn, time to understand what's going on around themselves. And too many children in a class and too few experienced staff members, we are failing our children because we can't give them the individual attention that they need. Regarding the whole class, we have to be eternally vigilant for seizures, for too high or too low blood glucose levels, and many of our children have very poor temperature control mechanisms. Many of our kids have colostomy bags, and it's TAs that manage the changes. They have diabetes, and it's TAs that measure the levels. They may have begun a blended diet, which is where food is introduced directly into the stomach via what we call Mickey tubes. This all takes a huge amount of time and a huge amount of training. Some of these roles have become no longer a choice, but rather there's an expectation that we will do these jobs. The reason being that very recently health authorities have pulled back on some of the jobs that the nursing team used to do, and the TAs, it's felt, will step up and plug those gaps. Speaking to my own head teacher, he's very much of the opinion that at the very top, education policy also needs to change so that it can describe and recognise the many ancillary jobs that we are doing, jobs that we have undertaken training to do so that we can do them well, and recognise it in the pay that is to come. Because we're not just teaching assistants. In this school, we're care assistants. We look after the personal needs of our children. We help the teacher. We help the children learn. We do some of the nurses' jobs in terms of running the enteral feeding throughout the day. So in my class, 9 children, one of whom is in hospital, one of whom comes in 2 days a week with her nurse. The others are all on Pediasure milk feeds, so we have to run those feeds throughout the day at the set times, and making sure that the battery pumps work and all the rest of it. We're physio assistants because we do the postural management of the children. We transfer them from their home chairs to their specialist class chairs, onto their side-lying beds, into their standing frames, and into and out of the changing room for the personal needs to be met. We're OT assistants because we put the hand splints on and we look at how the chairs are moving and how the trays are attached and all the specialist equipment that the children have in class. We're speech and language therapy assistants because we're working on early recognition of symbols, choice making. We feed the children that do eat orally, but sometimes you have to be specially trained for that, using thickened fluids to ensure that children don't aspirate and develop chest infections, which can be so serious for our kids. We're also mentors and coaches for new staff and supply staff. Sometimes, because many of our teachers are so young and inexperienced, we become teacher trainers, those of us that have been here sufficiently long to have developed skills from other very able practitioners. It's a big job, but most of us do it because we love it. But the physical, mental, and emotional toll at the moment is more than considerable. Lots and lots of people are off with musculoskeletal injuries, bad backs, frozen shoulders, and the stress, because we are understaffed, means that even more people are leaving us less well-staffed than ever. The head teacher explained to me that retaining and recruiting committed staff has become incredibly difficult. He really feels that the country needs to recognise the training, the skills, and the expertise of the TAs that work here. That experience needs to be rewarded. The pay needs to be appropriate, and then he might be able to reduce the class sizes and everyone will benefit. An improved morale and improved standards at the end of the day that we can take proper care of our children. People are leaving for retail, either because the money is better or because the money is the same, but the stress is considerably less. It sounds like a catalogue of complaints. It's not. We love what we do. We would just like to be recognised for what we do. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I didn't turn my mute off. Schoolboy error, big apologies. I was going to say, Bernie, massive thanks there. And you can see when Bernie speaks, it's really impassioned and from the heart, so really strong input. So our final input is from Sarah Jenkins from Jerry School, Bryn Mawr Foundation School. So Sarah, big welcome to you and really pleased to hear your input for us this morning. Or this afternoon now, actually, nearly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sarah. I'm a Level 3 Learning Support Assistant at Bryn Mawr Foundation School. I specialise in working with our ALM pupils. I've been working at Bryn Mawr for 5 years and my role within the school has developed for 5 years with more children coming in with more complex needs. I qualified as an LSA in 2017. Before this, I studied at Cardiff Met where I got a degree in art and design, but unfortunately couldn't find employment locally, so I took on a night course to study for the Level 3 position. Since getting my first job at Bryn Mawr, I love working with the children and would love to progress in the role further. I've broken down the next part into 5 aspects of the job and what I do daily. So first, I'll start with my individual support. I provide extra support and encouragement to students who are struggling academically and emotionally. I monitor pupil progress. I work closely with teachers, parents, and external agencies to address pupils' individual needs. Outside agencies I work with include Families First, InReach, school nurse, school counsellors, and I encourage pupils to communicate effectively. Classroom support. I assist the teacher in preparing the lessons, help the children understand the instructions and what they need to do throughout the lesson, deliver tailored activities to small groups or individuals, provide one-to-one support, manage classroom behaviour and promote a positive learning environment, supporting the social and emotional development of the pupils. Interventions. I provide small group interventions for literacy and numeracy. I do a mixture of paper worksheets and online learning programs like IDL. I also do small group or individual talk about social skills sessions. I also do wellbeing sessions with our dog Mally, who greatly improves the children's well-being. They love the sessions with the dog. Mally can also be used for literacy and numeracy interventions. For example, pupils can read to our dog Mentor Mally. I also provide a safe area for respite where pupils can regulate and then get back into class. This is sometimes during lessons, break and lunch. Admin. Logging pupil progress. Emails to staff and outside agencies. Updating timetables, tracking ALN attendance, completing referrals, including InReach, ELSA, counsellor, space wellbeing, uploading documents correctly to the correct platforms, working alongside the ALN Co. Setting up screener tests for dyslexia and dyscalculia and recording the results, logging safeguarding, acting on them and completing DTRs where appropriate. And the last bit I have is my professional learning. I've been fortunate to attend many training sessions to benefit my position. I have done my qualification and I am a qualified HLTA. I'm one of the school first aiders. I've also completed the advanced safeguarding where I am able to do the DTRs. And then training courses I've attended talk about attention, autism, exploring behaviours that can challenge, RFID, the dog mentor programme, sleep and sensory processing. And I'd just like to say that I do love my job and I believe we provide vital support to our pupils and the school. Thank you.
Sarah, thanks very much this morning. Really appreciate that. Excellent again. Thank you. I'm sure everybody who's joined us today recognises the value of bringing external speakers in. I think it really adds strength to the data. So thanks again for our speakers. So we're going to move into Q&A. So as we said from the outset, you've got two choices. We've got a couple of questions in already that we'll start with, but feel free to add further questions in the chat or pop hands up. The EWC team will be watching for the hands and you can ask the question directly if you choose. So let's get started on the questions. The way I'll do it, I'll read the question out, direct it to one of our panel, and then invite the rest of the panel to add to those comments if they wish. So Jerry, I'm going to direct this first one to you. So it's from Abby. Welcome, Abby. It's very clear from what we're hearing today that learning support staff are critical to how schools operate. How can schools better balance the varied responsibilities of support staff and allow them to fulfill their potential without overburdening them? Jerry, can you have a go at that one for us, please?
Yeah, thanks very much. And Abby, thanks very much for the question. I think this is crucial. The role of school leaders is to look after the well-being of all their staff, and the role of the TA, I think, has developed immensely over particularly the last 5 years. I think what's really important for school leaders is have a really good understanding of the pupils who are coming into their school. We do seem to have more pupils coming in with complex needs. So therefore our preparation over our transition is crucial, not just in year 6, but we need to know more information in 4 and year 5, because it needs to give us time to train particular members of staff in particular needs that we have for our individuals who are coming up. And so I think that's one thing that's really important. Also, I think it's from the school leaders, and that's through the core of the school. So, from the head down to the deputy, to the assistant heads, down to the ALNCO, it's really having understanding at all those different levels where the pressure points are, and making sure that the appropriate workload is put onto the TAs, and having a greater understanding of how they can serve those children that they are. And I think we need to look as well at the flexibility of the TAs, so before school, after school, when does their employment start? There's lots of things that we have to look at as well around their breaks. Do they take breaks at different times? Therefore, pupils can be looked after throughout the day. So it's the organizational side is really important as well. But definitely leaders at all levels throughout the school have to have an understanding of the workload of the TAs. And the complexity of the children that they're working at. But also it needs to link very carefully with the school strategic development plan in how they're trying to improve. And that's linked with the professional learning of the staff as well. And, what they're targeting in those under that plan over that, and really they focus all their energies in those areas.
Jerry, thanks very much for the detailed answer there. Members of our panel, does anybody else want to add to Jerry's response there at all? Feel free, please. Rosie?
Thank you. If I could just come in on that as well. Absolutely, Jerry is completely right in everything he's saying in terms of the approach that needs to be taken. But I think increasingly, one of the ways that we can allow learning support workers to fulfill potential is to, as Jerry has mentioned, offer them appropriate training. Many of our members don't have an appraisal, even an annual appraisal. They don't even know that training is available for them. We know that there's amazing training out there. We know that a lot of this training can be provided to to learning support workers, which will help them feel more skilled and equipped, and not like they are in a role and adapting and spreading themselves so thinly. And I think if we have an opportunity where there is a framework whereby there is an expectation that learning support workers at least have opportunities for training that are linked to their role, that will really make a big difference. You know, Jerry referred earlier to the report that we had that stated that we have a lot of learning support workers who aren't included on inset days, for example. That means they're not paid to come in on an inset day. So, you know, they're not getting necessarily the whole school approach to training, which would actually perhaps be more particular to the needs of that school, that any training that provided should be provided within work time, not something that learning support workers are trying to find outside of school. So communication about training, a commitment to training, and more staff in the classroom would be, you know, certainly one way of preventing that overburdening pressure that we are seeing on support staff in schools.
Thank you, Rosie. We've got a few questions rolling in now, so I'll move on to the next one. This one's from Ben. Again, it was through the chat. So Ben, again, welcome and thanks for your question. Sarah, I'm going to direct this one to you initially, okay, because of what you said about being HLTA. So the question is, how can schools better support teaching assistants who want to progress to HLTA status or pursue teacher training? Can you give us your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have the HLTA position training offered to me by the assistant head. I took on that and I was given the time out of, you know, my daily task to complete the training and given the support then to do the interventions. And it was free, obviously, for me to do it. They are offered.
Okay, thank you. Bernie, have you got any perspectives on this one as well? Obviously, HLTA or teacher training isn't for everybody. You got any thoughts on this one at all?
Yeah. Well, here we've got many HLTAs, and they all stand in for teachers, but they also do roles outside of the classroom, like teaching Makaton or teaching the manual handling, or teaching team teach for behaviour support. Most people who are HLTA here have moved up the chain, really. They've started off as a TA, they've shown an interest, and they've asked for and received the training to become a senior TA. And then of those people, some people would like to progress, and then they do the additional training to become a HLTA. This school is very supportive of training throughout the workforce for the teachers and the assistants. We're involved in all the training that's provided. But we do have HLTAs come in from outside too. And you know, they'll come and interview here and get a HLTA position. And I do think it's not easy for them because our school is so different. So you come in perhaps and asked to take over a class in the absence of a teacher, and you may not really know where to begin. So there's initial time, I think, when people need to acclimatise to what goes on here.
Thanks very much, Bernie. Interestingly, I was speaking to one of the major supply agencies. I was meeting with them recently, and they said they've been asked more and more for HLTAs now from schools and don't have that many on their books. So there seems to be an increased demand. Okay, let's go to the next question. Pleased to say this is a verbal one. So we've got a brave person in the room. So this is from Rebecca Roach. So Rebecca, I don't know what you're going to ask the panel, so I can't tip anyone off. So, but feel free. Big welcome to you, and please ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone for a really interesting presentation this morning. It's more of a comment than a question. I wanted to challenge a statement on one of the slides that said the PL offer for learning and support assistants remains inconsistent across Wales. I'm in charge of the Teaching Assistant Learning Pathway at Central South Consortium, and I would suggest that we have a very consistent national professional learning offer. We work very closely with all the other regions, and all of the regions in Wales provide schools with an induction programme, a practicing programme, and an aspiring HLTA programme. So those are our 3 national programmes that I can guarantee you all regions offer across Wales. So I would possibly suggest that the professional learning offer is not inconsistent, but the take up from schools is inconsistent. So that was my first point. And the second point just builds on something you've just said, Hayden, actually. I'm also in charge of the newly qualified teachers in our region, and I'm becoming more and more aware this year that they're struggling to find supply work as a teacher, but they're being offered work as an HLTA. And unfortunately for those NQTs, that work doesn't count towards their induction period. And I totally understand why schools may be, offering them the work because it's cheaper for them to get an HLTA in, who they are then allowed to ask to lead the class. But for those NQTs, it's a frustrating situation, I think, because they're doing that HLT work. So they need the work. The supply work is not out there for teachers, but they can't count it towards their induction period. So it's a challenge to schools, really. I know why head teachers are doing it, and I know budgets are tight. So, I know the situation, but it's an interesting picture for me. So thank you, Hayden.
Rebecca, thanks very much for that one. On this one, I'm going to bring Bethan from EWC in. Bethan oversees work that the EWC does on induction. And we're seeing a few things this year in terms of patterns of employment for newly qualified teachers in terms of what they're able to secure. We're seeing something a bit different. So I'll kick this one off with Bethan and maybe bring Rosie in after that, because Rosie's got the All Wales perspective. So Beth, can you say a few things on this one, please?
Yeah, firstly, I was just going to respond to Rebecca there and just say, yeah, choice of words, selection of words, apologies for that. The offer is there, but you're absolutely right. It's how visible is that offer to our learning support workforce, and how accessible is it to them, given some of the things that we've spoken about here this morning. So take your point on the selection of words. Apologies for that, but I think the point remains that the experience of our learning support workforce is inconsistent in terms of the professional learning they are able to access for a multitude of reasons that we've touched upon already. The point you make there, Rebecca, on perhaps our newly qualified teachers being able to undertake their induction period, you'll be well aware, I know, that our NQTs can undertake induction whilst undertaking short-term supply work. And we have seen for the sort of first time this year that our NQTs who have notified us of their intention to undertake induction while doing short-term supply work is pretty much equal to those undertaking short-term supply work in school. But what we're also seeing is those login sessions to count towards their induction has or is quite small at the moment, because as you say, it would seem that the funding impact on schools is meaning that they're less likely to be able to offer supply as qualified teachers. And perhaps, I don't know, I'd welcome others' view on this, looking to the learning support workforce to supplement the requirements of schools at the moment.
Thanks, Beth. Rosie, can you come in on this one as well? It's one of the things you and I have others have spoken about quite a bit over the years, about the consistency from school to school, area to area, of opportunity and availability of professional learning. Can you say a few words on this one, please?
Yes, thanks, Hayden. Absolutely understand that there are inconsistencies across, and completely the Teaching Assistant Learning Pathway programme is absolutely critical and vital, and members do know about it, but often they don't get an opportunity to access the training that's available to them, not just from the consortia and the training that you're alluding to here, but there is so much other professional learning available to teaching assistants. A lot of it is free training. A lot of it is very specific, perhaps to areas that people have got more interest in. Sarah mentioned earlier some of the training that she'd done, which in any profession, I guess, if you have an inclination to want to progress or to learn more about a specific area, you know, you would have the opportunity potentially to gain more skills through training and education in that. What we are seeing is a complete inconsistency from school to school, where you've got a head teacher who is willing to provide opportunities for their staff to undertake training, whether that is from an external provider or to provide that internally. Then we start to see some real opportunities for career progression for our members. So they are starting to remain in the profession. They are starting to understand that they have a role outside of the role that perhaps they were first employed to do, and they can see a real career in front of them. And that's really beneficial. But when in this day and age, we're still seeing our members of staff cleaning cupboards and sorting out lost property on inset days, and they're not encouraged to attend training. They may understand what's available, but are not having an opportunity to undertake that training in paid work time, but are expected to do it outside of school, then it does cause a problem. Some of the work that we've done already, and working closely with Welsh Government, there have been some real promises to changes in terms of the professional learning that's offered to teaching assistant. The professional learning grant conditions have been changed so that that should be a whole school workforce offer. More head teachers and other teachers are being offered professional learning in respect of what the needs of their TAs might be in terms of training that they might need. So they're in a position to be able to help guide TAs in terms of what other professional learning might be useful for them. Certainly the role of ESTIN is something that has been encouraged to get more understanding of what the opportunities are for TAs and learning support workers to gain more opportunities and gain more training, certainly just not on the job, but more professional training, which would help them progress potentially into becoming a teacher. And the last education minister developed a role of a TA governor champion, who would not necessarily be a TA in a school, but one of the governors who had the responsibility to try and encourage more opportunities for training and support for TAs, so that they could have more of a career pathway in the profession.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rosie. Still a few more questions in the chat. I'm going to juggle the order ever so slightly. So, Jerry, I'm going to come to you, if I may, on the next one. It's from Kathy Sean. Kathy, good to see you and hear you. Thanks for coming to the session. We've worked with Kathy for many years, one of the HR leads in one of our local authorities. So Kathy asks, Brynhawnder, is there any update decisions following the teaching assistant job descriptions review report from the School Social Partnership Forum and the Task and Finish group, particularly, that you're aware of? Jerry, any update you can give on this one at all?
Yeah, I think since the report has been published, we have to go through a series of presentations to different Welsh Government groups, but also to all the local authorities themselves. Now, as you know, we then went through changes in political leads for Welsh Government. So everything went on a hold during that period. It's back up and running again. There's been initial meetings of where we're going next, so for signposting. So there's nothing to report, but I think the delay on this occasion was the change in political leadership, and during that period of time, everything was put on hold.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. We'll go on to the next question, and this is from Olivia. Olivia, thanks for the question, as with everybody, and again, welcome this morning. This one, Rosie, I'm going to come back to you on this one, because again, it's something we've talked about quite a bit, but then I'll bring everyone else in on this one, because there are probably potentially quite a few perspectives on this question. So Olivia asks, it was mentioned earlier about minimum qualifications for learning support workers. What do you envisage these being, and will adequate support be available for existing learning support staff as well? Before I invite Rosie to speak, just a couple of EWC perspectives on this one. because this is a point that we've raised many times to government, that when the EWC was asked to register support staff and also other groups, for example, staff in FE, work-based learning, youth work, we said, look, it's normal that if you have professions where the staff are required to register with a professional body, there will be minimum qualifications to register. What government said to us about support staff is they said, look, can you work with us on this one? Because before we introduce any minimum qualifications, we haven't really got a handle on how many staff do these roles in Wales, what exactly they do and what their qualifications are. Now we've got that data, we are saying to government, look, now's the time to start thinking about minimum qualifications, but these shouldn't be hurdles or barriers. These should be to equip the workforce to have the skills that they need. So Rosie, do you want to comment on this one first, and then I'll bring the others in, including our support staff in the room this morning.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Hayden, and thanks for the question. I think one of the first things, if I can answer the last bit first, is that it's really important that any decisions that are made regarding this must ensure that anybody working in the profession currently who perhaps doesn't have those qualifications must be given ample opportunity to achieve those if they become that this is the standard that is expected, so that they are able to, on the job, whilst they're learning, whilst they're being paid to be in school, have an opportunity to reach those if they want to, but that evidence that they have been working in the employment for a while should not preclude anyone, or certainly anyone shouldn't face any threat to their role if they don't have those qualifications. So I think, certainly there must be opportunities for people to gain those if a minimum level does become something that we see. That was one of the recommendations from the Workforce Board, is that there is a minimum level entry qualification. What we find is that because there isn't one, we have TAs working in school who don't even have a qualification in English or maths. So obviously when they're trying to support pupils with numeracy and English, it does provide an additional challenge. If the very people who are supporting those children actually might have struggled with those topics and subjects themselves. So, it does almost seem contradictory when they're the very people who are sitting very closely with pupils, helping them with those skills, if they don't have those skills themselves. And we run courses for numeracy and literacy in unison, free courses for our members, and they're often oversubscribed. So I think that does give you an indication perhaps of the number of people who still are looking for support in being able to reach a level that they feel equipped to support pupils in school. And equally, we had a school seminar, and a lot of the feedback that we were getting from our members was that we've already seen the number of supply TAs who are coming into school, that they are, because there is a no entry level, there are often school leavers coming into schools as supply staff, being paid more than the TAs who are working in school, because they're on obviously a supply daily rate, who don't have those skills, who don't have any qualifications, and who in fact are just a body in the classroom rather than anything more than that, and are not able to even potentially assist or certainly be able to support children with the needs that they have in the classroom. So I think even without that minimum level entry qualification, we're starting to see a kind of a saturation in supply staff. That's not to say they're all like this, but of people who perhaps don't have the necessary skills to even support some of the most vulnerable pupils in the classroom.
Thanks very much, Rosie. Sarah and Bernie, on this one, the topic of minimum qualifications for somebody to be a TA, which there are not at the minute, but also then in-service professional learning. Can you give us any thoughts on those two? What do you think? Do you think improvements could be made in those two areas, or do you think things are okay now? Sarah, maybe start on that one for us. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea for them to have the entries. I didn't realise myself that was the case. Maybe because I got my English and maths, I just assumed all LSAs are the same. I think it would be beneficial for the pupils.
Okay, thank you. And Bernie, what do you think?
I think that when supply staff come into school, we personally are more interested if they've got a manual handling qualification and experience rather than English and maths. But English and maths learning and teaching used to be offered here, certainly as an MVQ, by people who wanted to develop their qualifications while they were in school. Literacy and numeracy were available here for members of staff that wanted to take it up.
Okay, thank you both. The next
Can
question.
can I just add, sorry, Hayden, I think that we're hearing examples today from two very well supported teaching assistants who have got head teachers who completely value the role. And I'm not saying that all head teachers don't, but there are, you know, there are constraints within the systems in school, funding, etc., which means that we're seeing a very a great example in the two teaching assistants that we have here today that is not necessarily replicated across Wales, and it is so patchy. There is professional development is something that is without a national framework for that or an expectation for TAs in the same way that teachers do. Then I think we are going to always see a very patchy route to either being able to secure that or to being able to understand what's available and on offer. And without a minimum level, at least, you know, we're going to continue to see those problems arise.
Thank you, Rosie. The next question there in the chat is from Christy. It's quite a specific question. So what we're going to do with Christy, our communications team's already been in touch, you'll see there, just to get Christy's details, and we'll deal with that one offline. It's quite a specific query, so we'll try and help Christy as much as we can offline. We're nearly out of time, so there's one final one. Jerry, it's a follow-on from your comments about the work of the Partnership Forum, and there's a question there. Are copies of the report publicly available? I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps you can help with that one.
Yeah, Hayden, I'm not sure myself. I know the first report in July of 2021, that was made public. The most recent report in 2024, it's with the school's social partnership forum at the moment, and I'm not too sure if that was put in the public domain. I know all the job descriptions were circulated to the local authorities, but I'd have to chase that up myself, or the person who asked the question, if they could ask the SSPF, I'm sure they'd circulate a copy.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. I thought that was the case, actually, but I think a few of us will be interested to know the answer to that one. So thank you, and thanks for the question. Okay, we are out of time, so we're going to stop there. We're going to finish on time. I want to just say a huge thanks to everybody who's come along and listened and taken part in the event. And as I say, we often find that when we put these up online, it gets cascaded quite a lot. We watch the hits on that, and we usually get more hits after the event because it's always a challenge when to put these on. If you put it in school time, that's difficult. If you put it in the evening, that's tricky as well. So please share on. Also, a massive thanks, as I say, to all of our speakers. These are busy people. So Jerry, Rosie, Bernie and Sarah, big thanks. And of course to the EWC team as well. So we're done. Thanks to everybody. Thanks for your time. Hope to see you at a similar event again. Thanks very much. Hwyl fawr.